We are honored to have a very unique guest with us today. We have the technology editor and chief of Industry Week, Peter Fretty. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. We're greatly honored to have you here, Peter. So as the technology leader for Industry Week, what is the buzz you're hearing around the manufacturing space today?
Well, there's always a buzz in manufacturing about continuous improvement, taking operations to the next level. But really for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, the buzz has been all about digital transformation ever since the whole Industry 4.0 came out. And, that's a difficult thing because digital transformation itself isn't one thing. Like you can say robotics, but it's not robotics. It's so many other technologies. It's the blending of all those technologies. So what does that actually mean to a manufacturer? Every manufacturer is at some different stage of where they're at, sort of on that digital journey, and what really matters to one manufacturer might not matter at all to another manufacturer. Mm-hmm. So interesting buzz there. And it sort of kept a lot of people sort of on the fence, like they weren't sure where they really wanted to invest or if they needed to invest. I think it's really digital transformation is more about becoming smart manufacturers or smarter manufacturers than it is about necessarily embracing any one or group of technologies. But that said, the pandemic sort of shifted the whole focus, and everybody all of a sudden realized that, I actually do need a lot of these digital technologies. I mean,
yep.
Just like we were talking before, the whole new normal. I mean, you have to figure out what's going to allow you to actually operate in the way that you need to operate. Mm-hmm. So, I think that brought in a new meaning on some of those technologies, especially like remote technologies, some of the technologies like what we're using right now, being able to communicate with each other, and also operating machinery. So, mm-hmm. I think COVID sort of pushed people to make those decisions.
Yep. We've seen that same impetus with COVID and digital transformation in the financial sector. We all kind of were caught flat-footed, and to your point, there are a lot of people that recognize the importance of digital transformation, but kind of where do you start? How do you take such a broad subject and focus it into, strategically aligning with your company to grow? And I think that can be the challenge.
Right. And also, I mean, the money amount, how do you justify spending, some of these companies are saying it's going to cost them $1 billion to actually go through a digital transformation. That's hard to justify.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies that was, a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. Well, with COVID, a lot of these things, the priorities shifted. And within 5 months, a lot of the digital technologies that actually matter to them were in place.
Mm-hmm. Now, we try to leverage an agile approach at TurnKey Lender, kind of focusing on the low-hanging fruit, getting that taken care of, understanding that, digesting it, gaining confidence, and then expanding accordingly.
Sure. That makes sense.
So where did your passion for manufacturing come from?
I've always been intrigued by how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's amazing that you can look at turning like rods of material into the things that we use every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just all the technology, everything that goes into actually doing that, and it's the skill, the art, so that's always intrigued me. And spent a number of years in manufacturing, both aerospace industry, made cutting tools for a while, was in candy industry. So some interesting jumps around, I guess, in manufacturing. And I mean, that's really where my whole interest has been with manufacturing.
That's fantastic. So like if you're talking about cutting tools, and if we were to pick on the hard candy, we're talking about precise measurements, precise accuracy of either the ingredients that are going in there or the tolerance of the metal that would be used for cutting, which is extreme.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Would you say your passion for manufacturing is as great as your passion for journalism? Is it a close second, or do they kind of bump
You
into
know,
each other.
in a way, they sort of blend together
Hmm.
because being a journalist covering manufacturing, I get to sort of jump into all the technologies and keep learning, keep digging into what people can do to get better, not only better products but better processes. So
Hmm.
I sort of get to be a little bit of a channel, I guess,
Hmm.
between all the people that are making up these new technologies and the people that are manufacturing products.
Gotcha.
So it's a nice mix.
Yep. Yep. That's awesome because then you get to leverage both talents, right? And they feed off each other.
Exactly.
Very
Exactly.
cool. So in covering the manufacturing sector and, that broad subject of digital transformation, are you seeing industries, focus on any type of specific technology, or is it just kind of to define and assemble what is the best technology for where they are in that space at this time?
I think it's a lot of defining what fits your need,
Hmm.
but I think there's a handful of technologies that are sort of uh, interweaved in
Hmm.
the whole digital. I mean, if you look at manufacturing, there's industrial Internet of Things, so everything connected, data analytics, robotics, the current trend towards the cobots, so the robots that no longer have to be caged,
Hmm.
uh, wearables, additive manufacturing, which again, the pandemic really put a spotlight on everything additive and being able to 3D print things, when supply chains collapse.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I think as far as technology, I think the smart technologies seem to be keep surfacing back up. So everything that's connected,
Hmm.
which at the same time is a little bit scary. If you think about all these breaches that keep happening, you know, uh, I guess they wouldn't happen if you didn't have the same connections that we have today.
Exactly. Exactly. I think supply chain is very interesting, right? When I graduated from college, I worked for a distribution company, and I learned very quickly that what we were distributing was hardwood lumber, and we were delivering it to these places that would mill cabinets and furniture and motor coaches, anything that you could make out of wood. And I always had a happy client when those machines were running and they were
Mhm.
making something. And I had an unhappy client when those machines were sitting idle and not doing anything. So I really had to make sure that our deliveries were just in time and always to the quality they expected. And most recently, kind of the scary thing is that in Texas a couple of weeks ago, we kind of got to participate in this unusual freeze.
Yep.
And the grocery store that I get all of my groceries for my family for, you know, could not get supply because the trucks that bring the supply couldn't drive on the roads because the roads were frozen. So very quickly, there's this huge disruption in supply chain that we take for granted.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's supply chains are so robust, but at the same time, they're so fragile. And I
Hmm.
think that we're going to see that sort of align how manufacturers look at where they produce or where they purchase from. I
Hmm.
think it's gonna be a shift, a big shift.
Hmm. And so, within Industry Week, do you focus for your clients and for the people that follow your organization? Do you focus on lifts that like include ERP and how ERP can affect the organization, supply chain management, data analytics, et cetera? How does that work?
I mean, I think we cover that whole mix. I mean, there's the whole blend. Anything that's technology that touches, manufacturing can help manufacturers improve.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but I think sort of if you look at what's actually giving companies that biggest benefit or biggest lift, sort of
Hmm.
goes back to my first point on where they're at on their journey. And
Yeah.
there's so many amazing technologies that are out there right now, and some of them are quite mature, others are just emerging. And I
Hmm.
think it's, uh, you know, might be like the data analytics that's actually going to come through as sort of the big wins
Hmm.
as we move forward here.
Yep. And we've all seen that over the years, there's like there's like this there's this motivation to go and get as big as possible and have it all in one system like an ERP, or then there's like this trend currently that may exist where You're buying something that's very specific with use case and functionality and bolting it onto that big piece of technology. And, that strategy kinds to come and go depending on the years.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Are there any manufacturers that you see today, like maybe industry manufacturers that are more progressive than others, aerospace, renewables, anything like that, or are they all kind of at lockstep?
I definitely say every industry sort of has the people that are out there on the bleeding edge,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones that have maybe figured out how to embrace the technology a little bit better than others. But that's not to say that the others aren't doing well. I mean, because let's face it, sometimes you don't need to have the technology. I mean, there's certain manufacturing processes that the technology, it would be great to have, but it's not necessarily going to improve the overall outcome without just increasing the price.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The cost of goods sold, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you see the organizations that are embracing this change? Does that start from a leadership perspective, or does that start from maybe a customer perspective, trying to stay in front of the customer? Where have you seen that, or does it matter?
I think a lot of it ends up being the leadership and sort of how open they are or how successful they are at change management.
Mm-hmm.
And, actually showing that here's the reason that we're doing this and finding the purpose. And then, obviously they've got to get that buy-in,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't matter if you put a technology out there on the floor. If everybody doesn't buy into what it's doing, then they'll never use it. And then you have this, expensive black box there that is completely meaningless.
Yeah, I don't like to ever see that. I think we call that shelfware instead of software.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, there's definitely companies out there that get it. I mean, recently had an article about intertape polymer, IPG in Utah, and they make the shrink wrap that goes around, like if you get a skid, it's got plastic that's wrapped around there. And, they've really been dedicated to the whole digital transformation. They're looking at all the different areas of technology and where they can implement them. And they found some serious wins lately with how they're embracing data analytics.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool.
And then article that went up today, Rolls-Royce Aerospace, they've integrated artificial intelligence into their whole design process. So they pull the three kinds of data that they have, so historical data, engineering data, test data from past products, and they integrate that into the design concept so that what they design ends up being far closer to the actual produced product. So it eliminates the costs of a lot of those different engineering tests that happen when you're introducing a new product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to, that's an example of where AI is really going to jump in there, because it's going to be able to help, learn sort of what the processes are, learn from past mistakes, and then inform engineers so that they're designing things that are ready to produce.
Fantastic. And, from a manufacturing perspective, that could be daunting, because you could be talking about supply, you could be talking about labor, you could be talking about lifespan, you could be talking about testing of the product, all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's cool. So we have had the opportunity to play in the manufacturing space a little bit. We've offered our technology to clients, to manufacturers that may want to see us or be able to look at their clients, look at the overall validity of the business, to understand the risk of making a product go from, goods that have not gone through the manufacturing process all the way through an order. So if you would like to ask me some questions, now we can turn the tables and you can ask me all kinds of stuff.
Sure. So where would you say that TurnKey Lender adds value to that whole manufacturing sector?
Very good question. So, right where I was going with that is that as a manufacturer, you may want to either have distribution where you're taking your good and you're giving that to somebody else to do the distribution part of it, or you may want to have that type of in-house financing, right? What we've seen and what I've experienced is that manufacturers have this cost of doing business, and then they take that product from a raw good to a finished good, and they sell it, and then we have this fun thing called accounts receivable. Sometimes the manufacturer's clients can pay very good. Sometimes those clients can't pay very well at all. And the manufacturer has all of this risk, all of this labor, all of this cost of goods sold risk throughout that process to then only be delayed in payment, right? 30, 60, 90 days greater. So the value proposition of TurnKey Lender is that as a manufacturer, if you wanted to analyze the risk of a potential client's order, you could do so using our technology.
Okay. Can you maybe touch on some of the advantages of offering financing to your clients as a manufacturer?
Sure. So, one, it depends on the cost of the item being manufactured, right? Aerospace, those planes are very, very expensive. If it's yellow iron for say Holt Cat, right? Those pieces of equipment are very expensive. You may find a client that, has done really well in business and can pay for that up front, or you may find a client that wanted to have options to maximize the cost of that product over a period of time. So with TurnKey Lender, not only could you analyze the risk of that person or that entity and loaning them that money for that product, but you could also look at the life of that repayment on our technology. We leverage AI, just like you had talked about before, where we look at the overall life cycle of a loan, and we look at the communication between the lender, the manufacturer, and the client, the borrower, so that we can see all of those behaviors, how they requested the money, how they documented the request for the money, how they made those payments, if they asked for a modification, if they had to go to servicing. And then if it's repeat business, we can have the manufacturer be able to look at that overall to make decisions. And really what I think that the biggest value proposition for a manufacturer from that perspective is maybe pricing that opportunity according to the risk, right?
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. So maybe touch on what some of the advantages of pulling trade credit checks on clients would be.
So, pulling a trade reference client or pulling a trade reference for clients is the ability to understand, are they up to and keeping up to their obligations in the world, right? Are they leveraged? Are they do they have good cash flow? Are they paying their bills on time? And as a manufacturer, all of that cost in the manufacturing process is risk, right? And if I don't have an in place to go with that or to collect the cash for that manufacturing process, I'm really, delaying the inevitable from a cash flow perspective, right? So looking at a DMB, looking at a LexisNexis, maybe even looking at the guarantor of the organization that could be buying those goods gives me the ability to understand the risk in my manufacturing process. Also, doing those type of credit facilities.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege. And Peter, we thank you so much for the time. If any of our audience has any questions for Peter, please feel free to reach out. And any questions for TurnKey Lender, we're always here. We're happy to help. That's what we're here for.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.